Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Love That Lasts, the relationship podcast. And today we are going to be talking about healthy me, healthy we, as it relates to how we pursue our individual well being and how it overflows and contributes to couple relationship well being. I am super excited today to have our guest, Dr. Julie Foucher Brown. Julie is a physician, health advocate, and former elite CrossFit athlete dedicated to helping people pursue lifelong health. She earned her medical degree and completed her family medicine residency at the Cleveland Clinic while achieving four top five and two podium finishes at the CrossFit Games. Wow, super impressive.
Mhm.
She holds a master's in nutrition from Case Western Reserve University and is trained through the Institute for Functional Medicine and the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. Julie is passionate about bridging fitness and medicine and is dedicated to helping people live healthier, more fulfilling lives. She continues to train for longevity and has hosted the Pursuing Health podcast since 2015. So she's an expert on all things podcasting. So, welcome today, Julie. I am so glad to have you on Love That Lasts, and it is a pleasure to sit down and chat with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and so excited about the podcast that you're launching and the topic that we have today.
Well, me too, Julie. And just to give our listeners a little context, a little bit of our relationship history doesn't go back that far, but it goes back to a special time this past fall in Uganda, of all places.
Mm.
But we got to be a part of this wonderful trip with Bob Goff and friends and our spouses as we were part of some of the work with Love Does. And also, you became quickly my husband's favorite doctor because he got a little sick over there.
Aw.
So, Dr.
That
Julie
comes
to
with
the
the
rescue.
territory. I feel like anytime you're traveling, right?
For sure. So much appreciated. But I also wanted to just ask if you would comment a little bit because something really special happened over there after
Yes.
you had just gotten married in the States and then came
Mm.
over for your honeymoon, spent a little bit of that time in Uganda with us. And then there was this surprise wedding. What was that like to have Bob Goff officiate your wedding for the second time?
Oh my gosh, it was so special. It was by far the highlight of our honeymoon. We had just gotten married in Kentucky and then we went to Africa for our honeymoon and we spent some time doing a safari and some time at the beach and then we met up with you all in Uganda and really it was the people that we were with and being able to see the work that Bob and Love Does is doing there and we had just gotten back, I think, from a day at the prison, visiting the prison. And quickly, Lincoln got shoved into one closet. I got shoved into another closet. We were put in traditional dress for a wedding, and we had no idea what was going on. And then next thing we know, we're walking down the aisle in this gorgeous setup. I mean, this was a full-on production, and
Truly.
they had thought of everything: music, dancing, Bob officiating. And having all these new people that we had just met there celebrating with us was just really special. And even another really special part was afterwards, this man named Francis, who had been cooking for us all week, asked if he could play us a song on his
Yes.
guitar. And he started to play a song that we had almost chosen as our first dance song, but we didn't.
Serious.
It was the runner up. Yes. So we didn't dance to it at our original wedding. And we got to dance to it then. And as we were dancing, this beautiful rainbow came out in the sky behind us. And it was just the whole thing was so magical. So it was
It,
really a special moment in our lives. And so glad you got to be there and be a part of it.
It truly does stand out as a great memory on that trip. It was really beautiful, and to see you guys, just to have that experience, you'll treasure that. It's kind of like wedding part two. So
Oh my gosh. Yes, the element of surprise and so Bob to do something and Jody to be so thoughtful about every detail and Bob to be doing something so whimsical and surprising. And I think it really encapsulates, we were there to be able to learn about the work that was being done in Uganda and these children that are being helped. And, instead we got this amazing gift and surprise in our lives. And I think that's really embodies love does. That's what love does. It just shows up for people and creates these really beautiful moments. So we were grateful to be on the receiving end of that, which we were not expecting.
Well, well said, but well deserved. You guys are such a lovely couple. And Jason and I, we have just enjoyed getting to have that first experience of meeting you, and so happy to see such a flourishing relationship. So awesome. Well, let's transition a little bit into our time today. I'm super excited to talk about health and wellness from an individual perspective, as well as it flows out into relationship life. It might be really helpful for our listeners, Julie, just to give a little insight about your background, because you've got this beautiful, wonderful kind of combination of being a CrossFit athlete, then going into medicine, and just having this passion, wanting to help people in their own health journeys. Could you give us a little history that kind of just ties those things together?
Absolutely. Well, I feel very blessed. I think when we all look back on our paths and see that, it wasn't what we were expecting in the moment, but it leads us to this really beautiful place. And that certainly was the case for me. I had known for a while I wanted to pursue medical school, but primary care, family medicine was the last thing on my mind. I did not think that's what I wanted to do. It was very broad. I thought I wanted to be a specialist in something that I could understand really well. But I found CrossFit when I was in college, started competing early on before it was really a huge sport. And by the second year when I was competing, it was growing. There were sponsors. It was, really taking off as a sport. And I got to be part of that original wave of women growing in the sport together. And so I continued competing as I began medical school. And so what that allowed me to do was to have this different perspective as I entered medical school, where, I was learning the basics of medicine and spending time in primary care offices and seeing patients really get sicker and sicker every time I saw them because
Mm,
the primary care office isn't really a place to create health. It's a place to treat disease. And so, you come, you talk to someone maybe about exercising and eating better, but then you don't see them for 3 or 6 months. And so, unless they take that upon themselves to make changes in their daily lives, they're probably not going to get better. But on the flip side, I was spending a lot of time in CrossFit gyms around the country and seeing people really dramatically change their health and come off of medications and lose weight and gain confidence. And it was really empowering. And as I learned more about the majority of diseases that plague our population, so many of them are rooted in our lifestyle. And so I just became so passionate about being on that preventive side of things, of really trying to help people and empower people through their lifestyle to be as healthy as they can possibly be and stave off disease for as long as possible. And so that's really what propelled me then into family medicine. And I was very lucky that while I was doing my training at the Cleveland Clinic, they opened the Center for Functional Medicine with Dr. Mark Hyman. So I was exposed to that very early on. And then in my residency training, we also had the opportunity to do integrative medicine fellowship through Andrew Weil's program. So I just had these great early exposures that helped shape the way that I thought about health and I thought about medicine from a very early perspective or early time in my career. So I was very lucky to have that.
yeah, and it's wonderful because it just seems like you're really stepping into your calling. And I love how you're pursuing your career and what you're doing with a lot of intentionality. As we think about this notion of healthy lives and longevity and the things that go into our well being at many levels, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and talk about some of these things within a relationship podcast is I don't think always there's a lot of focus about the individual well-being as it relates to the kind of the effect of relationship well-being.
Hmm.
And in my field, I deal a lot with therapy and I do marriage retreats and help people, build healthy, loving relationships. But I find that sometimes there's not a lot of thought given to, oh, wait, I'm an individual and how am I doing as an individual in lots of areas of my well-being? And I
Hmm.
see with couples that sometimes when there is a struggle within something going on individually, physically, emotionally, whatever that might be, it can have effect because the relationship is really about two people, right?
Yes.
Coming together. So I was just curious when we think about couple relationships, we often, center on things like communication, or maybe we're having a conflict with each other and maybe not thinking as much about the individual well-being. Why do you think individual well-being is an important dimension to thinking about relational health?
Well, I think it is crucial. And that comes purely, this is not for me clinical, but this is purely from my own experience and what I've seen. I feel very lucky. As we talked about, I just got married last year. I was 36. I'm 37 now. My husband is older. And I think part of why we found each other and have had such a strong relationship so far is because we spent a lot of time becoming healthy individuals first before we came together. And that came, for both of us through lots of ups and downs and, difficult relationships, difficult realizations about ourselves. But I think if we are not healthy as individuals, and when I'm saying healthy, I'm talking about mind, body, spirit across the board, emotionally healthy, then we bring that into the relationship. And not to say, okay, we all have to be, perfect to come together in a
Right.
relationship, right? There's a, but to really know ourselves, understand ourselves, and be willing to look at ourselves first, so that we're aware of the blind spots that we have, of the things that we have to work on, and how those might be affecting our relationship, I think is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of kind of like holistic well-being
Hmm.
and this notion of continuing to pursue well-being. You're right. It's not about being perfect because none of
Right.
us are going to be at that at any point in our life, but it's like kind of the momentum, the journey towards that. I'm
Hmm.
curious in kind of in from your perspective, what might be kind of some indicators or signs that could kind of indicate that maybe something at the individual level could be affecting the relational level? Anything that comes to mind there, Julie?
That's a great question. So I think I think the biggest filter for me is whenever there is a lack of focus or acknowledgement of what we ourselves are bringing. Usually, when
Mm,
there's a conflict in a relationship, it's not all one-sided. There's stuff
true.
that both people are bringing. And if we have the health to be able to look at ourselves and you know, it, humbly and say, these are the things that I struggle with. And this is maybe looking at it, this is where it comes from because of earlier in my life or my childhood. And this is why I struggle with what I do. Then you can come together with your partner and really work through things from a level playing field. But if you're always coming into it focused on the other person, then and you're not able to see what you're bringing, I think that often then we have these blind spots and it's not as easy to work through things.
I think that's a really good point because whether it be at an individual level or a relational level, when we don't have awareness, right, when we're not kind of being mindful and reflective and observant, we
Mm-hmm.
miss things. And
Absolutely.
sometimes I think in couple relationships, especially if you have one person that's a bit more of the giver, right, or the one
Right.
that's wanting to kind of, think about things that are happening to us, they
Yeah,
may put themselves on the back burner, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And we may think, oh, well, that's sacrificial or that's beautiful. But I have found at least when that pattern perpetuates, it actually is very taxing. It's taxing for the person, but it
Mhm.
also usually affects the relationship at some level too.
Absolutely. And often our health. I think this
Yeah,
is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is because I see the impact when these things go unaddressed for long periods of time, they are reflected in our physical health. I think that pattern that you just described, it's not always, but there is definitely, and I think there's research that shows this, that it is correlated with things like autoimmune disease. Because if we are not taking care of ourselves, our body will start speaking up and say, "Hey, pay attention to me. I need you
right.
to take care of me too," instead of just taking care of everybody else around you.
Yeah.
So I think using our being in tune with our physical bodies is important as well to understand what we need. Our the mind body connection and is very important, and I think we can use that as a clue.
That's good. So, thinking about some of the dimensions of health, let's talk a little bit about kind of the physical part of our lives. And that, again, not always talked about kind of within couple relationships. But from your experience and working with people and just kind of seeing this play out in life, how do things like sleep, nutrition, our exercise, and just mobility levels, how does that all kind of at an individual level even play out in affecting the relationship?
Oh, absolutely. So I think one way I like to think about this is just your overall resilience, right? As a person, we all have a certain level at which, we can be operating at our best and we can feel really good. And then there are all these things that are taxing on our energy. And whether that's physical, mental, emotional, eventually there comes a point where our battery runs low and then we don't have anything to give to anybody else, let alone our most important relationships. And so I think of the physical things as one layer of that. And, starting with foundations of sleep, right? If we're everybody knows this. If you're sleep deprived, everything feels harder, right? You're more
Absolutely.
irritable, you're not in a good mood. You can't handle the same amount of stress and have the same amount of resilience. And so having good quality of sleep is so important. And I think for so long now it's being emphasized a lot more, and people are wearing sleep trackers and more aware of the impact of different behaviors on their sleep. But for so long, it was this kind of badge of honor to say, oh, well, I only need 5 hours of sleep, or sleep when you're dead, or whatever people say. But it is so crucial for us to be able to be at our best. The same thing goes with nutrition. We can treat our bodies really well with really nourishing foods that are going to give us a lot of nutrients that are important for our body to function at its best. And eat regular meals and cook for ourselves and appreciate our food. And that can go a long way versus eating foods that really are just taxing on our body and contributing to disease. And then same with exercise. I mean, we've all experienced, right? After you move a little bit and exercise, you feel better. You're in a good mood. You're going to be more pleasant to be around. I know a lot of couples, myself included, sometimes if I'm feeling irritable or I'm getting irritable with my partner, I just need to go take a walk or get a good workout. And then all of a sudden I can come back and I can think more clearly and we can work through things. So, I think those things are all, critical in helping us maintain our personal level of resilience so that we can then bring our best selves to the relationship. I think there is some safety in relationship of knowing, okay, this person is there for me no matter what. And even if I'm not at my best, they're going to be there for me. And sometimes like that is the case. But I also want to bring my best self to my relationship when I can, and it not to say that like that safety isn't always going to be there if I'm not at my best, but I want to bring my best self. I want my husband to bring his best self as well because it's more, I don't know, it's more fun that way. We're a better team that way.
Yeah, it makes your love story much more beautiful when both people are kind of seeking their best. Again, not perfection. I love that idea of like bringing your best self and in many ways like wanting to be that kind of person that works from that and encouraging the other
Mhm.
person for that too. You're right. I think sometimes it's easy to get into habits the longer we are with someone to kind of take it for granted. Oh, I don't
Right.
have to work as hard. They'll love me. They'll kind of put up
Right.
with this. And granted, grace abounds. I need it. Everyone needs it in
We
a
all do.
relationship,
Yes.
right? But there's a point that I think sometimes if we take it for granted, it really can become something that sends a message of, I'm not prioritizing what I need to prioritize,
Mhm.
right? And it can come across with repeated messaging like that of disrespect, right? Um,
Absolutely.
if I am sleep deprived all the time and then I'm just irritable or I'm not going to be as kind with the way I'm talking about something,
Mhm.
that has a negative effect on a relationship over time.
Mhm.
So I love this idea of like striving for, we want to bring our best self to the table. And we want that for our spouse too, like not from a selfish
Absolutely.
perspective, but I want you to be your best because when you're your best, you're flourishing. And of course, it contributes to our relationship flourishing.
Absolutely. And not just in our relationship, but then you're your best everywhere else in life, in
True.
your job, your other
Spills
relationships.
over.
And you
Right.
want that for yourself and you want that for your spouse as well. And so I think, sometimes it may be easy to have that attitude of like, oh, well, they're not gonna, if your spouse maybe says something about it, like, oh, makes a comment or encourages you to take care of yourself more, that it's like, taking it personally, like, oh, they think there's something wrong with me, or
Right.
I'm not doing that. They're not going to love me if I don't do this, which is not the case. But oftentimes we have to look at that. I know for me, I have to look at that and be like, where does that come from? It comes from
Right.
the root of a story that I maybe had been telling myself since I was a little child that I have to go back and rework. And so just like any. I love the analogy of your relationships are mirrors, especially your closest relationships. And so anytime that you get sort of triggered by something that your closest relationships are saying or doing, it's an opportunity to first stop and look at, okay, where is this pattern coming from in me? Is that really what they mean or how I'm interpreting it? And where does it come from? And being able to then examine for ourselves, what am I bringing to this situation?
Yeah, good. Again, that self-awareness. I love it.
Mhm.
And as we transition into this little piece, I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are, this healthy level of accountability in relationships related to like our well-being
Mhm.
physically or other aspects of health. Do you have any thoughts about ways that couples can support each other, like with physical health, without coming across as being overly critical or
Mhm.
demanding or controlling? What would be some helpful ways to kind of encourage and support each other in those ways?
That's such a great question. Well, I think obviously this depends a lot on the individual and the situation and what are the
Sure.
things that maybe they may need. But I think for one is protecting the time and ability for your spouse or your partner to be able to do those things. So whether that means watching the kids for a period of time so they can go to the gym or you know, booking a massage for them once in a while or something like that.
Sure.
Just saying, I want you to have time to do these things. I think that's just a key part of it to begin with, in supporting those endeavors. I think as a couple, trying to choose things that you do together or ways that you live your life that are conducive to healthy living. So, having healthy food in the home and trying to get I'm a big fan of there's enough unhealthy food all around us in the world. If we can have healthy food in our homes and not be tempted by a lot of the processed and sugary foods, then that gives us a great foundation.
So true.
Making not trying to avoid the peer pressure of, oh, let's just go out and get ice cream or let's go do this
Right.
all the time. So just being in it together and understanding, what your goals are individually and as a couple and trying to support those, protecting time for sleep, understanding that we all have different sleep patterns. Like my husband and I, he's a night owl and I am a morning person. So we just know like I'm going to go to bed a lot earlier than you. And that's great because then he has his alone time at night and I wake up early. And like we don't have to fight about that because we just know that's how we're wired. So,
That's right.
um,
Respect each other on those differences. That's right. Yeah,
exactly.
that's good.
Exactly.
Well, and I wanted to touch on that point. You said it's contextual. It could even be different seasons of life. Like
Mhm.
I've seen, for example, when I've worked with young women who are moms, and especially if maybe they are a little bit more in the stay-at-home role and can be very sleep deprived, for example, with
Mhm.
just a lot of the job and responsibilities of
So
caring for
much.
little ones.
Mhm.
And I love it when I see a spouse, step in and say something like, you know what? You need some time off, right? Or let me kind of take care of this for
Yeah.
you. And I think this idea of like being your partner, your spouse's advocate is so
Mhm.
encouraging to say, when I notice that you're not feeling well or you're tired, or I'm noticing that, man, all you've had today is some crackers,
Right.
being attentive to what are those things that I can do to support you,
Yes.
I think makes such a difference. When my kids were little, man, when Jason would say something like, hey, why don't you just go to a coffee shop and get a little work done? To me,
Yeah.
that was like a
The
golden
best
ticket for,
thing. Yes.
yes. I was like, hallelujah, you're the best man. So
So
anyway, those
true.
those things that we can do to support each other.
I love that. Yeah, just noticing. Like that alone goes so far as just noticing and paying attention to what your partner needs, whatever it is. And even if you don't have the answer, just saying, "Hey, I'm noticing that you haven't eaten all day. Like what maybe we can get you some food or I can make
Yes.
you something or whatever. Even if I can't cook, we'll figure out a way."
Yes, we'll
Um,
come up with an option.
yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this dimension of kind of emotional, mental well-being. And I'm so thankful that we have seen, especially in the past several years, more attention to kind of brain health and mental health pieces. I think that has allowed people to step into this space to get help when they need help, but also just to have more healthy conversations.
Yeah.
That we realize that, when we are dealing with something at an emotional, mental level, it can certainly have its impact on our well-being. What would you kind of notice here about how emotional awareness, regulation, just that mental, emotional health component, how does that affect the quality of a relationship if one or both are really struggling in this area?
Oh, this is huge. I think this is the foundation. And I think as you said so well, now there's so much more awareness and discussion and resources and people are willing to seek help and support in this area. Whereas, our parents' generation, it was not even talked about. It was brushed under the rug. Therapy was very taboo. And so I think we're in such a beautiful time where people are really curious and wanting to learn about their emotions and how to regulate them when most of us were not taught this as children. And so I think for me personally, it's been something I've had to learn as an adult is even just to be aware of my what emotions I am feeling. I think for my as you read so beautifully in my bio in a beautiful bio, I for most of my life had been very achievement oriented. So all I was doing was focused on school and sports. And in sports, a lot of times you're just taught to numb your emotions, to push through, keep going. And so I really was so out of touch with my emotions. And when I started this process, it's very overwhelming because you don't even know what you're feeling a lot of times. You can't connect the sensations in your body to what emotions you're feeling. And so for me, it was this unfolding of first starting to just become aware of what my emotions were, what I was feeling, being able to express them because so many times we just submerge them. And then really being able to dig back through different types of therapy over the years and a lot of different tools and meditation and prayer and bringing awareness to be able to understand, okay, where does this come from? And how do I really go back to like the root and understand how, where these things came from and what I'm bringing to the table. And I would say that my relationship with Lincoln was actually one of the best tools. We were dating for several years before we got married because he was that mirror for me. And things would come up and I would then go digging back with my therapist and be like, oh, this is where this comes from. And so I can work through it. And so if we are not aware or we are not willing to do that work, then oftentimes it just gets projected on our partner. And so I think the hardest part is for each partner being able to recognize what's coming up for them, and being able to recognize when each other is in that like heightened emotional state. Because
Mhm.
when you're in that state, that kind of triggered or fight or flight state, it's really hard to work through things rationally. So giving each other the space to kind of let those things calm and work through them individually and then come back together and resolve them, I think is really important.
Yeah, those are really great skills. And you've said a little bit about this, and I love the fact that a doctor's bringing this up, but you bring in just how we are shaped and formed by some of our previous experiences that go before the start of this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that can be in our family of origins, that because that was a blueprint for a lot of things that we take on in life. And no family is perfect, but it many ways kind of gives us kind of that foundational piece for understanding emotions or
Mm-hmm.
not understanding emotions. And I know sometimes in my work with young adults, I'll have them kind of reflect back, like, look at kind of just your family of origin experiences. Like, notice, for example, how were emotions handled in the home? And especially the tough emotions like anger or frustration, or you're having conflict with someone, or you're really anxious or afraid. And it's interesting just to note how we learn, right? What do we do with that? How do we process it? And oftentimes, without even realizing it, we just kind of take that on because the way it was modeled. And then
Mm-hmm.
as we become adults, we have to kind of decide, okay, is this model helpful or do I need to learn something different?
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty is we can keep learning. We can keep engaging different tools and skill sets. So if I came from a family, for example, that maybe pushed big emotions under the rug, but now I'm in a relationship where we got to deal with things, well, guess what? I can learn.
Yes.
But I got to be open to that. And for the sake of my well being, but also my relationship, I got to learn how to handle those things. So I love that kind of connecting piece that you're making with our past and how to continue to grow even in the present.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think just curiosity. It's like if you're, are you coming from whatever you're looking at from a place of fear or from a place of curiosity and wanting to understand and learn? And it's two very different perspectives to have. And I think the other thing that was really helpful for me is normalizing that this is part of the human experience. So it is part of what all of us get to work through
Absolutely.
as humans, and it's how we grow and it's how we create, how we gain wisdom. um, and you don't have just because I think oftentimes we think like for me, I had a very normal, happy childhood. I had two parents that were married. I had, financial security, all of those things. I feel very blessed. But just because I didn't have an extreme situation of, abuse or parents divorce or financial instability, like that doesn't mean that I still wasn't shaped through things that I
Right.
have to work through. And so I think sometimes, we can minimize and say like, oh, well, nothing really bad happened to me. So like I'm okay. But it is part of the human experience that we all get to work through these things. I say get to because it is a privilege and it's an opportunity that
Sure.
we all get to grow.
Well said. Yeah. None of us are exempt, and
Mhm.
none of us are going to have a perfect record of this. I think the process of being willing to continue to be people that grow
Mhm.
is so key. Because we do see kind of more or kind of this less stigma around mental health issues and even maybe even engaging in therapy or
Mhm.
counseling. What might be some advice you would give to someone who's maybe trying to determine, hey, am I dealing with something at an individual level that maybe it's time to talk to someone else, right? Maybe I've been trying to deal with this on my own, or maybe I'm seeing it is playing out in my relationship negatively. What
Mhm.
might be some things you would encourage someone to think about or notice that might be helpful to say, maybe it is worthwhile talking to someone at this point?
Yeah, I think I'm such a fan of therapy. I mean, it is not accessible to everybody. I think that's one of the challenges is it's expensive. Insurance doesn't always cover it. There's a shortage, I think, of therapists in general, but I am such a fan. I think we can all benefit from it. And I would love to have the more proactive approach, just like I do with your physical health, instead of waiting until things get really bad. Let's check in with someone and talk through it and see. But that being said, I think if there is something that it is affecting your day-to-day life and well-being, it's something that's constantly on your mind, it's affecting your ability to experience just joy and peace in your day-to-day life, I think, and you don't feel like, whether it's friends or family or other people that you have that you talk through things with in a safe way, and you're still experiencing these things that you just don't understand or that are consuming your day-to-day life. I think that's always a sign to go talk to
Right.
somebody to help you work through it. But I'd be curious your response to that too, as a therapist, like what you would say.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think when we begin to see it starting to have like disruption,
Mhm.
right? Affecting kind of quality of life and well-being, and it's hanging on, right?
Yeah.
It's not just like, popping up for a little bit, but it seems to have some endurance and it's starting to really kind of spread and affect us. I think that's worthy of giving attention to. And, I want to also just that shout out, which I know you agree with too. It's not weakness
Mhm.
to say, hey, I need to talk to someone. And sometimes we can be going on in life and everything's okay, and then it's not.
Right.
We talked about, maybe someone starting off and becoming a mom and some of the stress or sleep deprivation. But
Yeah.
other end of the spectrum of life, we could be dealing with caregiving and dealing with aging parents.
Mhm.
And, that could have changed overnight, maybe because of a stroke or an accident. And now you're thrust into these big issues that are causing a lot of stress and weight. So I think it's never weakness to engage and wanting to receive help. And I also tell people too, like, maybe just have that first consultation. Sometimes
Yes.
people are worried, like, do I have to sign on for 50 sessions?
No.
It's like,
And
no,
sometimes you have to also, just like anything else in life, like sometimes you meet a couple different therapists before you find the right fit or different
true.
styles of therapy or approaches. And so you're not committed. I think that you have nothing to lose by at least starting out and talking to somebody. And I think asking for help is sometimes one of the hardest things for a lot of us to do. I know for me, that was a big step, and I didn't realize how little I trusted other people or was willing to ask for help until I got over that hurdle. But once you are willing to do that and realize that there's so many people out there who can, different perspectives, people who can help, want to help, who are there. It's their life's purpose to help. It's really amazing to be on the receiving end of help as well. And I can give one example actually for me, probably one of my first experiences with therapy. You talked about just normal things in life that we all go through. Um, this was my first year of medical school. I was also, this is not a normal thing, but I was, had graduated college. A lot of things happened in my life in a short period of time. I had graduated college. My grandmother passed away, which was the first grandparent that I was really close to that I lost. And then my uncle passed away unexpectedly in a plane crash. I started med school. I went to my second CrossFit Games. It was like this compressed time of a lot of things happening. And I really didn't process my emotions, my grief
Mm,
around the losses. And so a few months went by. I was at school. I was just struggling. I was crying all the time. I didn't understand what was going on with me emotionally. And finally, I reached out for help. I asked our dean, who was a psychiatrist, and she said, "Well, why don't you go talk to the school counseling service?" So I went, and after just like one or two appointments, everything changed for me. It was like I just needed to process what was going on,
right.
and I did not know how to do that on my own. And so that really showed me how powerful it could be. And then since then, I've engaged in different types of therapy throughout my life for different times.
Yeah, great example, Julie. And I love that because really that's what it's about is tapping into resources and being open to say, hey, if something's going on that's affecting me, then I want to step in to be that better version of myself. And I think for the other person, to say, hey, I support you in that.
Hmm.
And to really say, what can I do that could be more supportive to you? Do you need me to go with you? Do you want me to wait in the waiting room or
Right.
whatever that might be? But just says, "Hey, I'm for you." And
Yes.
couple advocacy, I think, is important as we
Yeah.
look at some of our individual well-being. Okay, let's move now. Just talk a little bit about spiritual well-being.
Mm.
And you talked about kind of this notion of holistic health. I'm curious for your thoughts just in terms of how does kind of our spiritual life, our faith walk, how might that influence just how we even love and relate to each other? So, me as an individual, as I'm thinking about my faith and following Jesus, like how can that influence and shape even the way I do relationship life?
Mm. Oh, in every way. I think just from a foundational perspective, it's like when both people in the relationship have really surrendered their lives and surrendered this sense of trying to control to God, to Jesus, to a higher power, it's a different way to approach and live life. And it puts a different perspective on you as a couple where, you are a team working together to try to be the best versions of yourselves and the best couple that you can be in that perspective. I know at our wedding, our pastor talked about, which is a common analogy, the triangle, where it's like
Yes.
both couples are at the bottom corners and God's at the top, and the closer you each become
Right.
to God, the stronger you become in your faith, the closer you become together. And so I think having that perspective really changes everything. I think so often if people don't have that perspective, we are putting all of the weight on ourselves as individuals or trying to control too much. And then that puts a lot of stress and pressure on the relationship and on the partner.
Yeah. Well said. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be at the same place. Like it doesn't mean as you look at that triangle that we're going to be at the same
Yes.
point, even of our faith walk or kind of how we're living that out. But I think the direction becomes kind of the piece.
Hmm.
I also find that just even in my own relationship, it shapes when I'm pursuing that and my walk with God in a closer way. I think it makes me love my husband better
Oh, yeah.
because it is so easy. even in a faith journey, to at times get caught up in what do I want? What do I like? What do I need?
Yes. Yes.
And it really reminds me, the beauty that I see in this is it reminds me to think about love from this unselfish perspective,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yes.
I'm for you, and to love someone well,
Yes.
in that
And how can you
process.
serve, right? Instead of like, what can you do for me? It's like, how can I serve you? And if both partners are doing that, it's magical.
Yeah, it makes me think. I love this particular quote, but one of a writer by the name of Gary Thomas, and he has this book about relationships. I think it's his one about lifelong love. But he said in his own marriage that something really shifted when he realized that his marriage was really an act of worship.
Mm,
That forever his wife he sees first not as his wife, but that is God's daughter.
mm,
And
that's
so
beautiful.
the
Yeah.
way I would love her is going to reflect a love for God. It's like a spiritual act of worship. And I love that because, for both men and women, from a faith perspective, if someone is wanting to walk that out, it can shape the way you look at your spouse. Is that before they were mine, in terms of like my spouse, they really are God's precious child. And
Mhm.
one of the ways I can really love God is how I love this person well. And so I always appreciated kind of that thought, about giving us perspective,
Yeah.
to remember how to love someone in a beautiful way.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Okay, I know we're getting pretty close to time, but I want to kind of pull this together. And if you could kind of think about just ways in which um, we could encourage listeners, could be like practices, just
Mhm.
some steps, right? It might not mean this long list of to-dos, but if there could just be some momentum in this direction, what would be some things that you would encourage listeners to do to just think about growing their healthy self,
Mhm.
that's a blessing to them, but also that can overflow as a blessing in their relationship?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I think it really starts with the consistent habits that we have, and they don't have to be big things. I think sometimes when we think about getting healthier physically, we think about, oh, I have to start going to the gym or totally overhauling my diet or whatever it is. And it's really about consistent habits over long periods of time that make the biggest difference. And so I think just taking a look, and that all just depends on where you are, but doing an honest inventory every once in a while of where you are and where you want to be. I love this framework. My husband and I use this. It's who's kind of thinking about who is the person that I want to become in any area. It might be physically, it might be mentally, emotionally, with your career, with your family, relationships. But who is the person I want to become, and really like visualizing that and seeing it and really like dreaming big about it. I think so many times we minimize what we're capable of. And then being really honest about where you are now. What are the things that need to change in order for you to become that person? And then laying out a plan for yourself. Like, what am I going to do to make this happen that's actionable and tangible and in one step at a time? And so that could be maybe physically maybe you haven't exercised in a really long time and you know that you're capable. You can set a vision of yourself being someone who is active and physically healthy, and you want to start exercising, and being honest with yourself about what are some of those obstacles, what are some of the stories you tell yourself about why you don't exercise, and getting to the root of those. And then making a small plan. Maybe you're going to start walking for 10 minutes after dinner every day. And how are you going to, do that for a couple weeks and then build on that? And you can break that down and do that with any physical, sleep. You can do that with nutrition. You can do that with any other area of your life. But I think always really examining, like the self examination, the awareness, and being honest. So many times we beat ourselves up and we have really negative self talk of
True.
all these things, but going a layer deeper, because so often that is again one of those like root issues that comes from how we were conditioned, and maybe the negative self-talk was protective for you at some time. And how do we get past that to understand what the real obstacles are? So many times there's a deep underlying belief, which was the case for me, of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of really loving myself, which is where it has to come from first before we can like fully love other people. We have to know ourselves, that we're worthy of that love. And so, and then showing it to ourselves. So I think, I think that's how I would approach it.
I'm so glad you touched on that principle, because this idea of taking care of ourselves at an individual level, it has to really be rooted in that I'm worth it. I am
Hmm.
enough. I am someone worthy of taking care of.
Hmm.
And that's not selfish. That's healthy.
Hmm. Yes.
And that's really being able to contribute kind of from mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally from this really important foundation. It's a core ingredient that's
Hmm.
going to spill over into your life to say, this is important. It's important
Yeah.
for me to take care of myself. And I think when we address those things and we are honest with ourselves and we really work from truth, I think it's easier, don't you think, too, to kind of grab
Absolutely.
on to practices that can start kind of shaping us. And again, it's not about perfection. I mean, you're going to go have the ice cream and you're going to have the days
Yeah.
that you're going to stay up late watching Netflix. We're
Right.
all going to have those moments, but it's like, am I doing practices though that are going to move me into consistent places of
Mhm.
well-being? It's like that idea of like the habits we create shape us,
Yes. Yeah,
and be willing to look at some of those habits in a loving way, as we do this. That's good.
absolutely. And finding what you're like for me, I always look at, okay, what's my baseline non-negotiables? Like I know if I go, and this has all been through trial and error, but I know if
That's
I
good.
if
That's
I
good.
if there's a certain number of times per week that I don't do some kind of exercise, I'm not going to feel good. I'm going to start getting depressed. I'm not going to feel at my best. And so there's maybe a week goes by, like last week I was on vacation at the beach, there wasn't a gym around, I didn't do the same kind of exercise. Maybe a week goes by, but I'm not going to like 2 weeks go by where I don't do that minimum because I've done it before and I know I don't feel good. And that
Mm.
all comes through trial and error, and experimentation and figuring out what that non-negotiable is for you to feel like you are at your best.
Yeah, non-negotiables. That's good advice, Julie. Well, and as we get ready to wrap up, this whole piece and conversation that has to do with a love that lasts, it's about relationships, and thinking about our well-being at an individual level, but also just being an advocate for each other, like, standing up for ourselves and wanting good for ourselves, but extending that also to the other person to say, I see you, I love you, I want you to flourish. That's such an important, healthy component of relationships, is that when you know this other person is for you. So before yourself, but also before that other person, because I think that beautiful bond of couple support just really aids in helping us to be healthy individuals along the way. All right, Miss Julie, Dr. Julie, that is.
Well, thank you so much, Heidi. This has
Man,
been amazing.
well,
I'm
it's been a beautiful conversation. I love what you're doing. Keep doing it. And thank you for just stepping into this space that I think is something we need to be talking about as we think about our individual well being and relationship well being, too.
absolutely. Thank you for having me for the great conversation. And yeah, just excited for the podcast.